Hello, how are you doing? The autumn is quite an exciting time in the book world. At least it often feels like publishers will hold back some of their biggest titles and books to bring them out in the autumn, specifically around September or October time. And over the next few months, a lot of exciting sounding new books are going to be published. So I picked out 10 titles that I'm really looking forward to in case you weren't aware that these books are coming out. So I'm going to go through and give descriptions of each of them. I'd love to know if you're also looking forward to these new books, or if there are other publications that will be coming out soon in this autumn time that you're really looking forward to. I'd love to hear about that in the comments below. And I'm going to give the projected publication dates of each of these books that will be published here in the UK. But of course, publication dates can sometimes change, but this should give you a rough idea of when they're coming out. Of course, I have no idea when they're coming out or if they've already come out in other territories and countries, but at least this is the case for here in the UK. And a lot of these authors have published books in the past that I've really loved and connected with, so I'm especially looking forward to their new books. And the very first book I want to talk about is such an author who is the Norwegian writer Hanne Orstavik, and she has a new book coming out called Tiamo, translated by Martin Aiken. It's being published on September 6th. And I think this book is a memoir, or at least I've heard some descriptions about how it's about how her husband died in the year 2020 from cancer, and how this is kind of a love letter to him, describing the process of his illness and them coming to terms with it, and him coming to terms with his own mortality. But in the publisher's description on End Other Stories, it's described as the protagonist, so I'm not sure if it sort of falls between memoir and novel or somewhere like that, but sounds like a really emotional and powerful story. And I read this author's previous book just called Love a number of years ago when it came out here in the UK, and this book has continued to haunt me for a really long time. It's quite a short book. It's one of those novels that I really cite as a very short, powerful novel that I think everyone should read, that describes this mother and son's journey over the course of one night, and why they're separated from each other, and the distance between them, and the encounters they have over the course of this one night. It is so powerful and beautiful. So I think this new book, Tiamo, if it comes out of an autobiographical experience, will probably be even more emotionally powerful. The Birdcatcher by Gayl Jones. This novel is being published on September 13th. It's the story told from the point of view of a woman who's a writer living on the island of Ibiza with her very close friend who's an artist and a sculptor, and who's been declared legally insane because she continuously tries to kill her husband. So it's about this very tangled, emotionally volatile relationship between this trio of people. It sounds very intense, and Gayl Jones is such a fascinating writer. Her novel Palmares was one of my favorite books that I read last year. It's set in South America and follows the slave trade and a girl who escapes from that. But also her novel Corregidora is an absolute American classic, following the story of this woman who's a blues singer who's in a very volatile relationship with her husband. And so first off, Gayl Jones, I mean, she's such a fascinating writer because she's so reclusive, and she hadn't published anything for quite a number of years until Palmares came out last year. But now she's suddenly become very prolific. She's already had a poetry collection come out this year, and then this new novel, and then I think after this new novel comes out next year, she has another book out. So she's been living quite a reclusive lifestyle, and if you read about her life, go on Wikipedia, read about her life, has had quite a wild and peculiar life, but yeah, suddenly has all of these books come out, which is really exciting. And the intensity and power of her writing really comes through, even though she writes on a wide variety of subjects and focuses of characters in lots of different settings and time periods, but quite often writes about the struggles and lives of Black women, and how she writes about that is so dynamic and fascinating that is an incredible writer, and I'm so glad that she has new books coming out. Nights of Plague by Orhan Pamuk is being published on September 22nd. It's translated from the Turkish by Ekin Oklap, and this is a great big 670 plus page epic, which is set in the year 1901 during the flailing years of the Ottoman Empire, and is about a ship, a vessel that's traveling to an island, and on this ship it carries a princess, her doctor husband, and the royal chemist, and it follows their stories as they enter into this land where that is beset by plague, and not all of these characters will survive, but not necessarily because of the plague. There's also a murder about, so it's a kind of mystery story and a story of intrigue, but also about the formation and fall of a nation. So yeah, sounds like quite a sprawling, really involving story that you can just settle down with over the autumn period. And I've actually never read anything by this author, even though he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2006, and I've always been meaning to. I have his novel, which has been on my shelves for many years now, and somebody just reminded me recently when I was talking about historical novels that they were recommending this book, so I do want to read this, but also I've heard really great things about this great big new masterpiece that he's bringing out. The Book of Goose by Yiyun is being published on September 29th. This is a novel about a woman named Agnes who lives in America, and she finds out that her best friend from childhood, who's living in France, has died, and because of this friend's death, she's able to finally reveal the story of her very dramatic past and how she escaped her childhood, being born in France and going to an English boarding school, and her murky past to arrive at a new place and completely reinvent herself. So it tells that dramatic story, which sounds so good. And I've read a few books by Yiyun before and always found them really emotional and moving and beautifully written tales. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading more of her new work. A Line in the World by Dorthe Nors, and it's translated from the Danish by Carolyn Waite, and it's being published on October 6th. And this is the author's very first memoir. She's published a number of novels before, but this book recounts her experiences growing up on this area of coastline where Holland meets Denmark on the North Sea, and how she grew up in this area and then later moved back there. And it recounts a number of dramatic stories of things that have occurred on this coastline, and just sounds like a very moving book. And I read this author's previous novel, Mirror, Shoulder, Signal. I think that's the order those words go around. I sometimes mix them up, but I really enjoyed that novel. It was listed for the International Booker Prize, and I've been wanting to read more by this author, and this sounds like a really good book. Illuminations by Alan Moore, which is being published on October 11th, and this is this great and famous author's very first book of short stories, and includes a range of fantastical tales. There's a story about two concubines living in a brothel. There's another story about a paranormal study group, and there's also a novella which is in part about the last 75 years of the comics industry, something that Alan Moore has obviously been very closely involved with. He's written such amazing books like From Hell and V for Vendetta and Watchmen, which I've all read and loved. But I have to say, one of my favorite books that he's written is Lost Girls, which he actually wrote as with his wife Melinda Gebbie, who illustrated these books. And so this is like quite big graphic novels. I'll try to fit it in here, and it tells the story of three childhood characters from childhood stories. Wendy from Peter Pan, and Dorothy from Wizard of Oz, and Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and recounts the story of their adult lives when they're at very different stages of their adult lives and their sexual awakening. So just to warn you, these books are very adult and very graphic, but I think they're so fascinating, how it gets inside the complexity of these characters and how it like uses them as kind of a springboard of these kind of characters from childhood stories is so fascinating, but also quite like a big like risk taking to write about these characters. So yeah, I thought this was like an incredible series of books. There's actually like 3 books in the series that are collected here in this. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to his new book of short stories. Another book of short stories called Terminal Zones by Gareth E. Rees is being published on October 13th, and these stories are set in a number of locations like a parking lot or a railway terminus or a motorway bridge, these places which are kind of liminal spaces that people don't often think about or consider because they don't spend all that much time there, and they're not often highlighted in fiction. And I think that's something so interesting about this author's work, how he sees these places as kind of significant or saying something much bigger than people really realize. And he runs a website called Unofficial Britain, which highlights a lot of places like this through video and text to show these different areas around the country. And also his short stories have quite a sinister edge to them, so I think they'll be perfect for autumnal reading. Yet another book of short stories called Liberation Day by George Saunders is being published on October 18th. I realized that I haven't read all that much short fiction this year, so it is partly my goal to read more short fiction in the autumn time. And these short stories are all about power and ethics and justice, but George Saunders also writes in quite an experimental, he does interesting things with narrative to tell his stories. He often uses quite an innovative form of writing. I absolutely loved his novel Lincoln in the Bardo, and I was so happy when it won the Booker Prize, but I have had an uneven relationship with this author's writing because I tried reading some of the stories in his collection 10th of December, which they didn't have all that much of an effect on me, so I'm kind of hoping that I'll find these stories more powerful, but I'm definitely interested in reading more of this author's work. Also on October 18th, the novel Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez is being published. This is translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell, and this is the author's first novel to be translated into English. I've read some of her short stories before from her collection, The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which I found really interesting and quite creative and very dark and fascinating, although they didn't always emotionally hit home with me. I thought she was such an interesting writer, so I'm really fascinated about this new novel, which is set during the years of the Argentinian dictatorship and is about a boy whose father is able to commune with the dead, and this kind of sinister organization called the Order has been using his father to commune with the dead for years, and now they want his boy to take his place. So it follows that story, and I was sent this beautiful and very creepy proof of the book, and I've heard some really great things about it so far. So yeah, looking forward to really sinking my teeth into this. And finally, the novel Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver is also being published on October 18th. This novel follows the life of a boy that's born with nothing and how he enters into foster care and rises in life to become an athletic star, and about his tumultuous love life. So following the trajectory of his life, and the title is obviously a play on Dickens' novel David Copperfield, and I think she uses his his same style or way of writing about being enraged with social injustice, but also having a real passion and care for her characters and showing an individual's life and development. So yeah, this sounds like such a good book. I've read a number of novels by Barbara Kingsolver before. Really enjoyed and loved them, including her most recent novel called Unsheltered, which was such a powerful story. The way she shows the transitions in time and of a particular location in this. And also I love this copy, how this has sprayed edges on it, which kind of blend in with the cover, which I just think is so beautiful. But yeah, Barbara Kingsolver is such a powerful writer, and I always look forward to her new work. So those are all the books that, or not all the books that I'm looking forward to this autumn, but 10 that I just wanted to highlight and talk about that I'm particularly looking forward to. So like I said, if you have any other suggestions of books that you're really looking forward to, please let me know about that in the comments below. But hope you're reading good things and having a good day. I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.